Are you a lifelong fan of General Hospital?
Are you a new fan who wants to know more about the history of the show?
Do you enjoy talking about the show with others?
Do you find yourself yelling at the TV?
Is your self-care an hour a day in Port Charles?
If so, we invite you to join hosts
Amanda Kimmel
and Shannon Coach at the place where all the hidden conversations take place and secrets are revealed.
Meet us at Pier 54,
a General Hospital fan podcast. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the Port Charles 411. Today is going to be part 1 of Lila Quartermaine.
In honor
the best
of Mother's
mother
Day.
ever on
Yes.
General Hospital. Seriously, there's not another a better mother.
Nope.
No, it's Lila. So you've heard us talk about her a million times easily.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the fandom page, it gives like a very quick, it definitely does not have as detailed. So I went into the Soap Central. Nope. I went to Curly Q Girl episode recaps. And even some of those, she didn't have like the full episode or the full year or whatever. But I mean, that's fine. But there was definitely a lot more juicy stuff to Lila's story that needed to be discussed. Today, we're going to start in 1978 and make it mostly through 1984.
All right.
But we used General Hospital fandom, Curly Cute Girl, and the General Hospital scrapbook a little bit.
The scrapbook should have been good for some Lila information.
No.
Really?
Yes. There was so many that I'm reading the thing, and I didn't have a chance to really watch anything, so that's why there's probably not even more.
Yes.
But no, the only thing it says is in 1978, it talks about, Alan, Monica's confession of love, persuades Alan to make Port Charles his home, and soon his eccentric family followed him to town. The upper crust, we'll just read this whole section. I had only taken a couple of descriptor words, but we will just switch this up.
All right.
So the upper crust Quartermaines were one of the wealthiest and most prominent families in the state of New York. The crusty family patriarch, Edward, had amassed a great fortune through his world-renowned conglomerate, ELQ. Making money keeps my arteries open, he often announced to no one in particular. Edward's kind-hearted wife, Lila, was as shrewd as she was wise. And I thought that was such a nice descriptor.
Mm-hmm.
But other than a few things in 1983, basically between then, not very much. Yeah, so then even with Curly Q Girl, it was, Lila came to Port Charles with the rest of her family. I think part of this was just everything pushed together. Lila basically seems to be the peacekeeper because, Alan and Monica's relationship was very on and off again. They were getting divorced and not divorced. And so she was like involved in that, but she didn't really have a central storyline. She was just always there. And then she was also there when Tracy was, having difficulty in her relationships, but then also wanting to be a part of ELQ and the difficult navigation of her relationship with Edward. So there really wasn't anything about Lila for a long, long time. So that was basically how she was in 1978 and 79. And then in 1981, I would love to I saw one quick YouTube video, but it was only like 5 minutes. So I'm like, okay, obviously that's not the storyline.
Right.
In May of 1981, Lila had an art auction to benefit General Hospital. Why aren't we doing that? Emma Lutz had been hoping to join high society, and she gave an ugly black statuette to Lila for the auction. The statuette was the Ice Princess. Then Luke, Robert, Alex Quartermaine, Edward, and Tony Castle, all planned to steal the statuette the night of the auction. And I guess somebody did, or I don't know. I didn't go back down that. Go listen to the Ice Princess because I guarantee it's in there.
Right. We did definitely talk about that then.
And then in October, Alex had left Lila's stocks. Laura and Luke were job hunting. So Lila called Luke and asked to see him at ELQ. And Lila offered Luke a high-paying position with ELQ. He is touched by the offer, but regretfully, he has to turn her down. I'm curious because if they were looking for jobs, why did he have to regretfully turn?
Why are you passing up a high-paying job at the Quartermaines?
Yep. And then it just says that Monica and Lila asked Robert to manage the diamond mine that the Qs own in South Africa. What happened to that?
Yeah.
Then November through December, Edward fires his secretary at ELQ when the woman informs that she has been spying on him for Lila. Edward tells Alan that Lila is going to bankrupt ELQ because she is setting the place up with computers. And in 1981, computers were people, not... Because I've read this and it said something, hired Randall as the computer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, were they still calling people were computers, not...
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the latest state-of-the-art technology. And then, she reached out to the mayor and asked about Luke and Laura being able to have the wedding at the mansion. And then Lila met with Robert and she wanted to help him. She wanted him to help track down a woman from Edward's past. Robert has done the job for Lila and she pays him handsomely.
Of course she does.
Mm-hmm.
Very generous. So then in 1982, Lila denies that she has any business with Robert to both Alan and Edward. Lila hires Robert to find the son of the woman he previously tracked down for her. Enlisting Randall's help, Edward tries to hire a New York stage actress in an effort to discredit Lila and get her tossed out of ELQ. Edward phones Alan to witness Lila, to be a witness that Lila has been senile. The actress Edward hires turns out to be an old friend of Lila's. Edward plans to declare Lila insane and ruined. Edward plots to get control of ELQ away from Lila. Robert informs Lila that he thinks he has located the son of the woman that she had asked him to find previously. Edward gets Lila to sign some papers turning over power of attorney to him, but later when he shows the papers to his attorney, he finds Lila signed them Mrs. Abraham Lincoln. Lila presents Robert with a photo she found of Eric when he was a boy. She wants him to track him down, and this was Jimmy Lee, and the story fizzled out due to a change in the writing staff, and it would not be taken up again till a year later. So even back then, they didn't finish out the storylines.
That's why I kept that in there, because I was like, okay, so there's hope.
Right. We'll bring it back in a year or so. And then in April, Alan took Lila to the opening of Luke's. Luke's had another club in 82.
That is what that said. Hold on. Didn't even occur to me.
I'll keep going. I'll keep going. And then if you happen to find it, I mean, he could have. I don't know. I don't know. So Lila at the museum board meeting at the Lila at the museum board hearing meets with the curator and talks about the expected arrival of the royal treasure of Malkuth. Meanwhile, David and Mel cut through the wall of the antique store, which is directly across from the museum. Lila and Dan at the museum are planning for the Malkuth expedition. David and Mel check the exhibition room as well, and Mel takes photos from every angle. What a perfect place to beam the hologram through the window, they muse. Robert accepts a position as head of security for Lila at the museum. Oh, that doesn't sound good. They're all working together.
Was that the end of that? Sorry.
Yeah, that's the end of 82. That's okay.
So Luke's Place was a popular casino in the city of Port Charles. Luke Spencer opened a casino in the 1980s, which he closed in 1983. In 2003, Jasper Jacks won the old yacht for Sam McCall, which he had now been calling the Lucky Lady. When Luke discovered Sam now owned the Haunted Star, he teamed up with her to start a gambling casino on there December 26, 2003, using the rights he had retained, closing his original casino in 1983, as according to the city charter, only one casino was allowed to operate. So he held on to that.
Nice.
Just so no one else could open up a casino. But
okay.
Yes, it was
also called
Haunted
Luke.
Star.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So where are we now? 1983?
Yep.
In January, Stella. Okay, seriously, guys, can we get some new names? This is not Stella Henry. This is Stella was housekeeper, I think. Oh, no. Let's it slip to Edward that Robert was hired. Oh, yeah, I think it was the housekeeper. Anyway, Stella lets slip to Edward that Robert was hired by Lila a year ago to track down his son, Eric, really Jimmy Lee. Crane Tolliver starts stalking the Quartermaine mansion. An accident at the waterfront lands Jimmy Lee in GH. Crane stalks Jimmy outside of the hospital door and later spies on the cues. Crane pushes his way into Susan Moore's cottage and gets right to the point. He tells her that there are no Quartermaine heirs because Lila Quartermaine is still married to him. An early marriage to Lila ended when Crane went to jail and the divorce was never finalized. The Q's arrive at Susan's and she drops a bombshell just as Jimmy Lee shows up too. Susan tells him that Lila is living a bigamist marriage to Edward. She never divorced Crane Tolliver and poor Lila nearly faints. Mark treats Lila at GH, who is there for a checkup. Lila runs smack into Susan and the two exchange words. I want to watch that. Edward then hires a PI to find Tolliver. The Q's worry that cousin Herbert will find out about Lila being a bigamist and claim all the money from Edgar's will. Remember, we talked about that with the staff because someone was hiding in a wall. If you have not listened to our Port Charles 411 about the Quartermaine staff, you need to go listen to that because that will make a lot more sense, right? That was...
Yeah.
Because it was someone that we hadn't even heard of.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we went down that little rabbit hole because if not, we would be like, what? Who's Herbert? Kane hands Edward all the documents of Lila's marriage to Tolliver, but Susan calls him and tells him it's only a copy. And then didn't continue down all this, but basically everything that they wound up doing and the fact that Crane Tolliver was even still alive and Lila's married to him still, quote unquote, when Susan Moore was murdered, this is why the Q's were looked at because they're like, well, Alan has cause because of Jason.
Right.
And Edward and Lila and Tracy all have caught, and Alan still has cause because of inheritance. So this is why they were so heavily looked into. And it was months. I mean, there's months and months gap between my previous paragraph and then this one. Lila is no bigamist and then denies Tolliver was ever blackmailing them. Tolliver goes to the trailer, don't know what that means. Oh, and removes the documents from under the drafting table. Tolliver bumps into Jimmy Lee outside of Kelly's and Mr. Holt lashes out at Crane, telling him not to mess with the Q's. Robert talks with Tolliver and he demands the divorce papers, but Crane refuses to tell him anything. Crane urges Jimmy Lee to use the papers against Edward. After Holt leaves, Crane reaches to disconnect his IV, so I guess he wound up in the hospital at some point.
Yikes.
But has a heart attack and dies, despite Rick's efforts to revive him. And then, so that happened. He died March 23rd. March 24th, a judge marries Edward and Lila in a private ceremony at the house.
Beautiful.
And that was basically it, other than being just like in and out of other people's stories for the rest of 1983.
That was some like karma for Crane. Don't be trying to
exactly
people's IVs.
And if you don't know who Jimmy Lee is, we did do a full 411 all about Jimmy Lee. So please go listen to that as well.
Right. So then in 1984, in April, Edward is stunned when Lila returns home unexpectedly from her European trip. Edward tries to hide the truth of Beatrice being in town. Comical mischief ensues as Edward frantically tries to keep Lila from seeing Beatrice, who just arrived at the mansion. Alan and Edward plot to keep Lila away from the spa, or else she will see Beatrice. Alan and Jimmy Lee escort Lila to the airport. She's going to Palm Beach. The Q's lied to get Lila out of town for a while. And then in May, Edward tells Monica and Alan that Lila is due back. Holy cow, that was like she was gone for a whole month. That was a nice vacation.
Mm-hmm.
That Lila is due back in town any day now, so they must get rid of Beatrice. Jimmy Lee tells Beatrice all about the Tolliver papers proclaiming Lila and Edward's marriage was bigamy, making Alan illegitimate. Monica unsuccessfully tries to get rid of Beatrice by having her fired at the spa. Edward offers his former lover a return ticket to Europe, but Beatrice is not going anywhere now that she knows about the Tolliver papers. Edward still doesn't know the papers were actually destroyed at the university fire. Lila returns from her trip and tells Alan that she wants to see the spa. The Q's decide to throw Lila a lavish welcome home party. Beatrice becomes miffed when she finds out that Jimmy Lee is not invited. Despite Alan's best attempts at dissuading her, Lila and Stella, again, not our Stella, insist on going to Avalon Spas. The frantic Q's try to ensure that Lila won't run into Beatrice there. However, Alan's plea to Jimmy Lee's family, air quotes, loyalty falls on deaf ears, and later they can't persuade Lorena either. Ian asks Lorena for help. He begs her to get Beatrice out of the spa before Lila shows up. When Lila walks into the spa, the first person to greet her is Beatrice. Beatrice loudly introduces herself as Jimmy Lee's mother. Lila regally leaves the room as Lorena smiles to herself. But again, Lila doesn't say anything. She just leaves the room because she is not that kind of woman to go off on people.
She reserves that. She reserves it.
Right,
she
exactly.
Has, but she reserves it.
Right. But she's not going to play that like petty game. Like that woman was obviously trying to start drama by being like, oh, I'm his mother. And she's like, not going to give you the satisfaction of watching me freak out. Back at the Q's, Lila demands that Edward get Beatrice out of Port Charles now. Again, family requests to Holt, Lorena, and Beatrice herself are unsuccessful. In that case, Lila coldly informs her husband that she's leaving him. Summoning Jimmy Lee to the mansion, a hurt Lila asks Holt why he's turning against her with Beatrice. Holt tells her that he did it to get back at Edward, not her. After refusing to order his mother out of town, Holt tells Beatrice about Lila's appeal. They realize that if the Q's ever learn about the divorce papers going up in smoke, they are out of luck. And then in June, the Quartermaines throw a dinner party. Immediately following the tension-filled meal, Lila announces that she is leaving. Is this just for the holiday weekend, the family frets, or is Lila really leaving Edward for good? Alan, Monica...
I said...
right? Oh no, I wonder what happens. Alan, Monica, and Edward all with worry over where Lila could be. As Lila continues to hide from the Q's, the family's panic grows. Putting a new plan into effect, Monica and Alan wangle their way into Jimmy Lee's apartment and search it.
I'm going to guess wrangle.
I like wangle better.
There's some misspellings from copy and paste. Sorry.
I like that word. Monica and Alan wrangle their way into Jimmy Lee's apartment and search it. They're intrigued to find a photo of a regal-looking man signed "With love to Beatrice from Ducky." This could just be a trick. Dookie?
Dukey.
That was like a real name on it? That was the guy's name?
If it was Ducky, wouldn't there be a C?
I guess, but Dookie does not sound like a real name. Like, I wouldn't want to be called Dookie. I'd be rather called Ducky.
Apparently that did not mean what it does now.
Okay.
It's not spelled the same way, but
true. But
I feel like, is that a pet name that his name's Duke and you just call him Dookie? And in which case, then we need less Dukes also. True.
See, I went with Ducky because when I was growing up, there was an old guy and that's what they called him. His name was Ducky. So I just assumed it was something, everybody had a Ducky in their life. The photo was signed "With love to Beatrice from Dookie." This could just be a trick, they conclude. If Dookie were to shower Beatrice with gifts, maybe she'd want to leave Port Charles. Sure enough, the presents start rolling in, making Beatrice wonder what or who might arrive next. Edward panics, wondering where Lila is. Monica pokes around the spa, questioning Beatrice about Dookie. Lila permits Stella to phone home to inform the Q's that she is all right, but won't be coming home until Beatrice is gone. Edward appeals to Jimmy Lee. Lila won't return unless Beatrice is out of town. Holt is shocked that Edward would even turn to him. Even an increase in the ELQ profits can't convince Holt to help out his father. At the spa, Dookie's latest gift arrives. Beatrice does not seem too impressed. Slyly, she tells Monica that such costume jewelry is only the first step in his game. Then the real thing arrives. Immediately, Monica orders Alan to spring for an expensive item. Beatrice announces to the spa ladies that the next gift that Dookie will shower her with is a trip to some exotic locale. Ecstatic, Monica tells Alan to buy the woman a first-class plane ticket to Tahiti. Edward calls Lila to inform her that she can come home as Beatrice is leaving town. When Lila calls a happy Edward, tells her that she can come home as Beatrice is leaving town tomorrow. Beatrice calls the airline and arranges to cash in her airline ticket, saying she can't leave town in the near future. Edward delightedly finds Lila has come home. However, when Alan and Monica run into Beatrice, they are aghast to learn that she's played them for a fool. Dookie, it seems, is the dog once owned by her former lover, the Duke, who is now deceased. Okay, now it makes sense. When Edward hears of the news, he refuses to lie anymore. Begging Lila to stay, Edward confesses to her that Beatrice is still in town. Lila agrees to stay until after the charity ball. Beatrice finds herself flat on her back after Edward pushes her into the bushes to keep her away from Lila. As a result of her rough treatment, Beatrice decides that she's soft-pedaled the cues long enough. She tells Jimmy Lee it's time to bring out the Tolliver papers, but Jimmy Lee reminds her mother that the papers burned at the university a while back. No matter, Beatrice intends to get her revenge one way or another. Dun, dun, dun.
Then July and August, certain that Edward is up to no good, Lila finds out from Stella that he's spending all of his free time at GH with Beatrice. Beatrice calls Jimmy Lee over to the spa. They discuss the Lila Tolliver marriage. Why wouldn't it be Lila Crane?
Yeah, right.
Crane was his first name. Anyway, marriage papers. Beatrice is trying to get evidence of the marriage. Monica finds out, and the cues discuss Beatrice's latest antics. Jimmy Lee is in Brownsville. Edward follows him there and then to City Hall. They're both trying to find witnesses to the marriage. Jimmy Lee visits Mrs. Hobbs, an older woman who turns out to be Crane Tolliver's sister. She remembers the marriage. Meanwhile, Edward is having a tough time getting information at City Hall. By the time he reaches Mrs. Hobbs, Jimmy Lee is already gone and has stolen the page from her Bible, which contains the marriage information for Lila and Tolliver, as well as the signatures of the witnesses. Jimmy Lee now has proof that Lila and Tolliver were married. I think that's really cool, because wasn't it back then when you got married, you got like the family Bible and then you signed it or whatever?
Right.
That's what they were taking out. Yeah. I mean, that's not cool to just be tearing pages out, but
not cool for Lila because she didn't want proof of that.
Right. Then in September at Kelly's, the Quartermaines were throwing a party. Lila reminds, and from this point forward, Edward is referred to as Eddie.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to go back to Edward because
yeah.
It's only cute whenever Lila says Eddie.
Right.
Or did she? I feel like it was always
really
Edward.
remember her saying that.
Yeah. Edward had to do. Oh, she reminds him of her deadline for getting rid of Beatrice. Tony gives Edward the name of a doctor who can prove that Beatrice is faking her injuries. I forget what happened there. I just didn't even go into it. The day and night of the charity benefit, Edward takes Alan's medical bag from him and steals some pills. Lila makes sure that Stella has her Lila's heart medication. At the spa, Beatrice is gloating that she and Jimmy Lee will soon have everything that they ever dreamed of. At the party, Mrs. B, I'm guessing that's Amanda Barrington.
Okay.
I could be wrong, though. And Sylvia successfully gives Beatrice a drink. Okay? This is a success that you give someone a drink at a party.
Yeah, I'm assuming because it has a drug in it.
Beatrice is getting very tired. Then Beatrice meets up with Lila at the pool and the two argue. Stella hands Lila a glass of water containing her heart medication. Beatrice drinks Lila's water and begins to lecture them all about their sordid business. Then she collapses and the Scorpios rush in. And this was Holly and Robert's. Well, it says Holly next. But it was Holly and Robert were the Scorpios.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, Edward, Holly, Mrs. B, and Sylvia throughout the evening have all stolen envelopes from Beatrice's bag, which then all believe hold the documents or pictures that she has been using to blackmail them with. At the spa, the mysterious valet can be seen in several scenes. Oh, there was a reason for that. Didn't I leave the thing in about Frisco? We're not there yet. Never mind.
Not there yet, yeah.
Okay. Monica pronounces Beatrice dead. Lorena tells the guests that there has been a horrible accident and the police want I didn't mean to leave that sentence in there.
Okay.
Lorena tells, I'm starting that paragraph over. Monica pronounces Beatrice dead. Lorena tells the guests that there has been a terrible accident and the police want everyone to stay put. Lorena tells Jimmy Lee that his mother has died. Rick tells Robert that nothing obvious caused her death. Edward tries to comfort Jimmy Lee, but he is having nothing to do with Edward. Edward claims to have once loved Beatrice. He never wanted her dead. Mrs. Barrington. and Sylvia. So it says Barrington, not B. Woohoo! I was right. Open their envelopes, and the envelopes are empty. Coroner calls Robert, telling him that there was a package taped to Beatrice's body.
What the heck?
Lorena and Leo, again, not even anywhere close to our Leo, try to figure out where Beatrice hid the picture and stock. I'm guessing that's ELQ stock.
Right.
Hughes open their envelopes and they're empty. And then Frisco goes home and listens to some music and looks at the ring that he bought. This was the charity event that Frisco bought the ring at.
Oh.
That's why I left that in.
Perfect.
He lays the ring beside his bed and goes to sleep. Oh, he bought the ring at the charity during the White Elephant sale. He lays the ring beside his bed and goes to sleep. The mysterious valet is under his bed. The valet tries to steal the ring, but is caught by Frisco. And that valet was Felicia. So go listen to the Aztec Princess 411 series, and that's where it starts. So then we go back to seeing Jimmy Lee sitting by the pool in Beatrice's wheelchair, trying to understand what happened. The Q's discuss Beatrice's death. Who has the Bible page? How do they get involved in these messes? Lila feels guilty about the pressure that she had put on Edward to get rid of Beatrice. Alan and Monica and Edward swear that they did not harm her. Quartermaines speculate that Jimmy Lee has the Bible page. Bert reveals that Lila had given the ultimatum to Eddie that she would leave town if something was not done about Beatrice. At the funeral, Robert informs Edward that he has the Bible page and asks why Edward gave it to Jimmy Lee. A third of the Quartermaine Trust Fund and about Lila's ultimatum. So he had given Jimmy Lee a third of the trust fund. Yes, because that's a third of his kids. Okay.
Right.
Jimmy Lee blames Edward for his mother's death and orders them to leave. At police headquarters, Robert and Bert look at the drugs found in Beatrice's system, as well as a list of people who had access to the drugs. The hospital. So Alan and Monica, and then later Sylvia and Amanda. Look at you.
Yep.
That's Amanda Barrington. So Robert goes to the Quartermaines to question them about the pills. Alan is missing 2 pills, and Monica is missing 1 pill from their respective medical bags. After Robert leaves, the Quartermaines argue. Edward doesn't want to take responsibility for taking the pills, and Alan believes that Lorena may have taken the pill out of Monica's bag. Edward and Lila have a sweet conversation about all the time she could have spent with him. They talk about their memories, and then Monica goes to the spa and talks to Lorena about the missing pill. She remembers giving her bag to Lorena on the night of Beatrice's murder. Lorena denies taking the pill. At the Quartermaines, Jimmy Lee confronts Edward. He wants the straight talk. He accuses Edward of giving Beatrice money. Edward doesn't know anything about how Beatrice got $250,000, and Jimmy Lee leaves. When Edward brings Lila to the hospital for a checkup, he talks to Alan and Monica and tells them about the money. He wants to know if they gave Beatrice the money. They decide to look into this matter to see if perhaps there are other suspects. Edward picked up Lila at the hospital, not sure why she was there. Alan then offers to go see Scorpio about the prescription drugs, but Edward says no. Alan and Monica decide to investigate whether Eddie has gotten any money lately from his bank account or broker. Meanwhile, Edward is checking the finances of Alan and Monica to see if perhaps they paid her off. Then in October, Robert talks to the DA. The charge against the murderer can now be murder 1. The Quartermaines are the main suspects. So this is now, in 1 year, the Quartermaines collectively are the suspects in 2 murders.
Yep.
Who was it recently? So it was Laura and Cyrus talking about, and you think at some point the Quartermaines never did anything? Right here. So especially when Robert traces the heart medication to Lila, Robert begins to suspect her. The Quartermaines, including Lila and Stella, discuss Beatrice's murder. When Robert arrives, he tells them about the heart medication and confronts them about Lila's ultimatum. The heart medication kills Beatrice. Edward interrupts Robert and confesses that he killed Beatrice. Robert arrests Edward for the murder of Beatrice. He takes them to the police headquarters and books them. Alan speculates to Monica that Edward is covering for Lila. They argue until Lila comes downstairs. She is convinced that Edward's confession is part of a master plan. Edward is put in a cell, and Lila and Stella come to visit him, complete with martinis and a picnic dinner.
Wow, that's my kind of jail.
Robert lets Lila spend some time with Edward. Lila professes her love for Edward. Then Robert goes home and shares his day with Holly. He lets her in on a secret. He does not believe that Edward killed Beatrice. Alan and Monica figure out that Eddie could not have murdered Beatrice. Could Lila have done it? When Alan and Monica and Edward are back together, they accuse him of faking the confession to protect Lila. Later, they wonder if Stella could have done it and bring Stella in and accuse her of murder. Stella has packed her bags. How dare they accuse her of murder? She resigns, and the Quartermaines apologize to get her to stay. Holly comes to the police headquarters to talk about the murder. They have narrowed it down to one killer, Lila. Robert cannot believe it, and Holly is very sympathetic. Scorpio drops by the Quartermaines to talk to Lila. And then I missed where this actually happened. Robert Scorpio calls and gives Ginny Blake the go-ahead for her exclusive story. Beatrice's death was an accident. The heart medication that caused her death was Lila's, but Beatrice drank it accidentally.
There you go. Dun, dun, dun.
And that is just the beginning
Ugh.
of Lila Quartermaine.
I'm so sorry that you drank my heart medication.
Right?
Not my fault that you died.
No, you drank the wrong glass. That's why you were supposed to drink the glass that was it put down on the table? And because it sounds like Lila didn't even know that she drank the wrong water.
Right.
So I think that's funny. We're only like a half hour into the story and already the Quartermaines have been suspects in 2 murders.
Yeah.
So I guess join us next week as we talk more about Lila. Not sure how far we're going to get, but we need this. We need the happy reminiscing right now.
Yes, I agree.
And join us on Monday as we recap this week's shows.
Have a good weekend.
And we'll meet you at the pier.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to go to pier54podcast.com to subscribe on your favorite platform. Don't forget to leave us a review. And you can also follow us on many social media channels. Just search for Pier 54 Podcast. Also, we are not perfect, so if there is something that we missed or messed up, just let us know by emailing us at pier54podcast@gmail.com.